Have you ever felt afraid to spend what you saved? The kind of fear that won't let you use your own money, even when you really need it? Have you ever found yourself postponing dreams, denying small desires, living with less than you could, just because something inside you says it's better to save it for later? And what if I told you that the security you seek by saving might be exactly what's preventing you from having real security? It sounds contradictory, I know, but this is the story of an ordinary man who discovered, the hard way, that money sitting still doesn't protect anyone. And maybe it's your story too. Roberto was 42 years old and worked as a bus driver. He woke up at 4 in the morning every single day, without exception. The alarm rang in the dark, and he already knew what lay ahead. 12 hours sitting down, staring at traffic, listening to complaints, holding back the urge to use the bathroom because the break was too short. He got home at 6 in the evening, his back aching, his eyes tired, and an empty expression on his face. He ate dinner in silence, watched half an hour of television, and went to bed. The next day, everything repeated itself. He lived in a distant neighborhood, in a rented 2-bedroom house. The paint was peeling in some corners, the shower only warmed enough, and the gate creaked every time someone came in. But it was a home. Inside that house lived the 3 people Roberto loved most in the world: his wife, Claudia, and his 2 children, Lucas, 10 years old, and Anna, 7. Claudia worked as a cleaning assistant at a hospital. She left home at noon and returned at 10 at night. They barely saw each other during the week. They talked through quick messages, exchanged information about the children, mentally divided the bills. On Sundays, when they were both home, the exhaustion was so great that any deep conversation was postponed for later. Roberto didn't complain, at least not out loud. He believed complaining was a waste of time. What was the point? He had responsibilities. He had mouths to feed, bills to pay, children who needed clothes, school supplies, food on the table. Complaining wouldn't change anything, so he simply worked. But there was one thing Roberto did with almost religious care. Every month, without fail, he set aside part of his salary and saved it. It wasn't much. Sometimes it was 100 reais, other times 50. In bad months, only 20. But he always saved something. That money went into an old envelope, hidden inside a cookie tin at the back of the wardrobe. No one knew about it, not even Claudia. It was Roberto's secret, his safety net, his plan B. He had learned this from his father, a serious man of few words, who always said, never trust anything completely. Save a little, always, because you never know what might happen. And Roberto took that as a rule. He didn't trust the government, he didn't trust companies, he didn't even trust his own job. Anything could happen. Any day he could be fired. Any month an emergency could appear. And if he wasn't prepared, the whole family would sink. So he saved. And with each passing month, that envelope grew a little thicker. Roberto felt good when he looked at it. It was like holding an invisible shield. As long as that money was there, he was protected. His family was protected. But at the same time, Roberto lived with fear. A silent, constant fear that he carried in his chest and never mentioned to anyone. Fear of losing his job, fear of getting sick, fear of not being able to pay the rent, fear of disappointing his children, fear that everything would collapse from one moment to the next. And the more he saved, the more that fear grew, because now he had something to lose. Claudia noticed. She didn't say anything, but she noticed. She saw it when Roberto turned down outings with the children, when he refused to go out for dinner, when he avoided buying anything for himself. She knew he was saving. She didn't know how much or where, but she knew, and she respected it. After all, she was afraid too. Lucas and Anna didn't understand. To them, their father was just tired. Always tired. They had already stopped asking for things. They learned early on that the answer would be no. No to ice cream. No to the movies. No to a new toy. No to almost everything. They didn't get angry. They just accepted it. And that, in a way, hurt Roberto more than any tantrum ever could. The years passed like that. Roberto saving, working, growing tired. Claudia working, caring, holding the household together emotionally. The children growing up quietly, learning not to ask, not to dream too high. The routine was relentless. Roberto woke up in the dark, worked under the burning sun or the rain, and returned home in the dark. He saw his children only on weekends, and even then, he was too tired to truly be present. He began to feel pain in his back. Pain that didn't go away with cheap medicine. But he didn't go to the doctor. He didn't have time. He didn't have money to spend on that. He took a painkiller and moved on. The pain got worse. He started to limp slightly. Claudia begged him to go to the hospital. He said it was nothing, that it would pass. The envelope kept growing. 2,000 reais, 2,500, 3,000. Each bill inside represented a denial. A meal he skipped to save money. A medicine he didn't buy. An outing he didn't take with his children. Clothes he didn't replace. But he saw it as an investment, as a necessary sacrifice, as a father's responsibility. Roberto had a coworker named Juvenal. Juvenal was about the same age, also had children, and also earned little. But Juvenal was different. He was always smiling, always had a story to tell. He spoke about his children with pride. He talked about the outings he took them on, the pizzas they ate together on Sundays, the games they played at the park. Roberto didn't understand. Juvenal earned the same as he did, sometimes even less, because he missed work more often. How could he do all that? How could he spend and still not sink? Roberto asked him once. Juvenal shrugged and said, "I don't know how to save money, Roberto. I spend it on what matters. And somehow, it always works out." Roberto thought that was irresponsible, dangerous. Juvenal was living on the edge. One day he would regret it. One day he would need money and wouldn't have it. Roberto was sure of that. So he kept saving, kept denying himself, kept accumulating fear in his chest along with the bills in the envelope. It was on a Tuesday morning that everything changed. Roberto was driving the 7 o'clock route when he received a call from the school. It was the principal. Her voice was tense. She said that Lucas had fainted during physical education class, that an ambulance had already been called, that Roberto needed to go to the hospital immediately. Roberto's world stopped. He felt the blood freeze in his veins. He asked another driver to take over, dropped everything, and ran. He ran like he had never run in his life. He arrived at the hospital sweaty, shaking, with his heart pounding so hard he thought it might explode. He found Claudia in the hallway. She was pale, with red eyes. They hugged, without saying a word. A young doctor called the two of them to talk. He led them to a small room and asked them to sit down. He said Lucas was stable, that there was no risk to his life. Roberto felt his legs weaken with relief, but the doctor continued. He said the boy had severe anemia, mild but present malnutrition, that his body was weak, that he needed medical follow-up, full exams, strengthened nutrition, and possibly vitamin supplementation. Roberto heard every word like a punch. Anemia, malnutrition. His son was going hungry while he worked 12 hours a day. How did this happen? He looked at Claudia. She was crying silently, her hand covering her mouth, her shoulders shaking. Roberto wanted to cry too, but he couldn't. His throat was closed. He only felt a crushing weight in his chest, as if someone had placed a giant stone on top of him. They spent the whole day at the hospital. They did tests, they talked to nutritionists. They received a long list of things Lucas needed to eat. Fresh fruits, quality proteins, a variety of vegetables, iron supplements, multivitamins. Roberto looked at that list and mentally calculated how much it would cost. A lot. More than he spent on food in an entire month. When they finally returned home, it was already night. Anna was at the neighbor's house. Lucas went straight to bed, still weak. Roberto and Claudia stayed in the kitchen, sitting across from each other, in silence. Claudia was the first to speak. She said, her voice breaking, "We didn't see it, Roberto. We were so focused on surviving that we didn't see our son wasting away." Roberto didn't answer. There was nothing to say. She was right. They had failed. He had failed. He worked so much, exhausted himself so much, saved so much, and for what? For his son to go hungry? For his family to collapse on the inside while he accumulated paper at the back of the closet? That night, after Claudia went to sleep, Roberto went to the wardrobe. He took the cookie tin, opened it with trembling hands. The envelope was there, full, almost bursting. He opened it and counted. 3,200 rays. 3,200 rays he had saved over 2.5 years. 3,200 rays that could have properly fed his son all that time. Roberto sat on the floor, the envelope in his hands, and for the first time in many years, he cried. He cried in silence, covering his mouth so he wouldn't wake anyone. He cried out of anger, shame, and regret. He cried because he realized he had spent years protecting an imaginary future while destroying the real present. In the following days, Roberto spent half of that money. He bought everything the doctor had recommended. Fresh fruit every day, quality meat, fish, eggs, a variety of vegetables, vitamin supplements. He paid for all the private tests so they wouldn't have to wait months in the public system. Lucas began to improve quickly. Color returned to his face. His eyes became brighter. He regained the energy to play. Roberto should have been happy. He should have been relieved. But he wasn't. He was terrified, because now the envelope had only 1,600 reais, less than half, and that felt like very little. Insufficient, vulnerable, dangerous. The fear came back with full force. The fear that something would happen and he wouldn't be prepared. The fear that the money would run out. The fear of being unprotected. So, Roberto did what he had always done. He went back to saving, but this time with even more intensity, with desperation. He cut everything he could. He stopped buying even the morning coffee he used to have at the bakery before getting on the bus. He started bringing a cold lunch from home, reheated food, sometimes just bread with margarine. He stopped taking the bus on his days off and walked everywhere, even if it took hours. He accepted overtime whenever it was offered, even on Sundays, even when his body begged for rest. He slept less and less, worked more and more, and saved. Saved with a compulsion he didn't fully understand. He needed to recover that feeling of security. He needed to fill the envelope again. He needed to be sure he was protected. But the more he saved, the more exhausted he became. And the more exhausted he became, the less he was able to work properly. He began to make small mistakes, sudden braking, confusion with change, arguments with passengers over misunderstandings, delays on the route because he fell asleep at the final stop and missed the departure time. He received a warning, then another. In less than a month, 2 formal warnings on his record. That only made everything worse, because now dismissal was no longer a distant possibility. It was a real, close, concrete threat. Roberto began to have nightmares about it. He dreamed he was fired, that he couldn't pay the rent, that the family was evicted, that his children went hungry on the streets. He woke up sweaty, his heart racing, and couldn't go back to sleep. Claudia tried to talk to him several times. She said he was killing himself, that it didn't have to be like this, that they could live with a little less pressure, that what mattered was being well, being together, being alive. But Roberto didn't listen. He thought she didn't understand. She didn't understand the weight he carried, the responsibility, the fear of failing, the terror of seeing everything collapse. He pulled away from everyone. He no longer talked to Juvenile at work. He no longer played with his children in the rare moments he was home. He no longer touched Claudia. He lived locked inside his own head, trapped in a cycle of fear and exhaustion that seemed to have no end. It was on a Saturday afternoon, 3 months after Lucas's episode, that Roberto saw something that began to change everything. He was at the supermarket, standing in the checkout line, buying as little as possible, as he always did. Rice, beans, cooking oil, salt, the basics, nothing that wasn't absolutely essential. And there he was, tired, with back pain, mentally counting every cent when he noticed a man in the line ahead of him. The man was about the same age as him. He wore simple clothes, a slightly faded shirt, worn-out jeans. He was carrying 2 shopping bags already full and was placing more items on the conveyor belt. At first, Roberto watched without much attention, but then he noticed something different. The man was smiling. He was talking to his daughter, a girl of about 8 who stood beside him. He explained something to her patiently, gesturing, laughing. The girl listened attentively, nodded, and laughed too. Roberto looked at the man's cart. There were fruits, lots of fruits. Apples, bananas, oranges, grapes. There were fresh vegetables, carrots, tomatoes, lettuce. There was meat. It wasn't steak, but it was reasonably good quality. There was fresh French bread, still warm by the smell. There were even some treats, cookies, a small chocolate bar, a bag of colorful candies. It wasn't anything extravagant. It wasn't a rich person's shopping, but it also wasn't bare subsistence. It was real food that nourishes the body and also feeds the soul. Food you eat without feeling guilty, without feeling like you're doing something wrong by spending money. Then Roberto heard the girl ask, in that sweet child's voice, "Dad, can we buy that cake there?" She pointed to the bakery shelf, where there was a simple chocolate cake. Roberto waited for the answer he himself would give. "No, sweetheart, we don't need it. It's too expensive another time." But the man looked at the cake, looked at his daughter, smiled, and said, "Of course you can, sweetheart. Go get it." Just like that. No drama, no guilt, no fear. The girl ran, grabbed the cake, and came back glowing. The man placed it on the conveyor belt with the rest. He paid for everything. He didn't seem worried. He didn't seem to be making a sacrifice. He simply seemed normal, calm, light. Roberto watched as they picked up their bags and left. There was something different about that man. He clearly wasn't rich. His clothes were simple. The groceries were modest. The girl wore worn sneakers. But there was a lightness about him. A peace, as if he wasn't carrying the world on his shoulders. As if he didn't live in constant fear that everything would collapse at any second. Roberto paid for his own groceries in silence. He picked up his 2 light bags, left the supermarket, and walked to the bus stop. But he couldn't stop thinking about that man and that girl, about her smile, about his calmness, about the way they seemed to simply live, without the constant tension that Roberto carried. He got home, put the groceries away, and sat on the couch. Lucas and Anna were playing on the floor with some old toys. Claudia was in the kitchen, preparing lunch. Everything normal, everything as always. The same house, the same routine, the same life. But Roberto couldn't get that scene out of his head. He kept thinking about it the rest of the day. Thinking during dinner, thinking while trying to sleep, and the more he thought, the more one question hammered in his mind. Why did that man, who clearly didn't have more money than him, seem so much happier, so much lighter, so much more alive? That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Roberto did what he always did when he felt distressed. He went to the wardrobe, took the cookie tin, opened the envelope, 2,700 reais. He had managed to save again, to recover part of what he had spent, and he should have felt good about it. He should have felt safe, protected, but he didn't. He felt fear, always fear. Fear of spending, fear of losing, fear of running out, fear of not being enough. And looking at that envelope, holding that money he never used, never touched, saved, with so much sacrifice, Roberto had a thought he had never had before. What is this money for if I never use it? He put the envelope away, closed the tin, and went back to bed. But he couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, thinking. And for the first time, in a long time, Roberto allowed himself to be completely honest with himself. He had been saving money for years. And during all that time, what had that money done for him? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It just sat there, accumulating dust inside an old envelope. It hadn't protected Lucas from getting sick. It hadn't stopped Roberto from almost being fired. It hadn't kept Claudia from working herself to exhaustion. It hadn't brought joy to Anna. It hadn't brought peace to anyone. On the contrary, the more he saved, the worse everything became. Because in order to save, he had to deny better food for his children, deny rest for himself, deny moments of joy for his family, deny life itself. And in the end, for what? To have paper stored away? To feel afraid of losing something he never used? Roberto thought about the man at the supermarket. He thought about Juvenal. He thought about all the people he knew who seemed to live better than he did, even earning the same or less. And he realized something obvious, something that had always been right in front of him, but that he had never seen. Those people didn't save less because they were irresponsible. They lived better because they used money differently. They used it to build real things, to invest in what mattered, to create memories, experiences, skills, relationships. Their money didn't sit still. It circulated. It was used. And somehow, that created more security than locking everything away out of fear of spending. Roberto spent the entire night thinking about this. And when the sun began to rise, he had reached a conclusion that was both frightening and relieving at the same time. He had been doing everything wrong. He had spent years building a fortress around a treasure he never used. He had sacrificed the present to protect a future that might never come. He had worked himself to exhaustion to save money that rotted at the back of the wardrobe while real life, the life that was happening right now, passed by without him noticing. On Sunday morning, Roberto did something he had never done before. He waited for Claudia to wake up, asked her to sit with him in the kitchen, and told her everything. He showed her the envelope, told her how much was inside, told her how long he had been saving, told her it was a secret, told her about his fear of spending, fear of losing, fear of not being enough, fear of failing. Claudia listened in silence, without interrupting. When he finished, she stayed quiet for a moment, just looking at the envelope on the table. Then she held Roberto's hand, looked him in the eyes, and said something he would never forget. Roberto, you think security is having money saved? But real security is knowing how to use what you have to build something better. Money that sits still doesn't grow. It just withers, like fruit you keep too long and that spoils before you eat it. Roberto felt a lump in his throat, because deep down, he knew she was right. He had always known, but he was so afraid to admit it that he chose to ignore it. They talked for hours that morning. They talked about fear, about responsibility, about what really mattered. Claudia said she was afraid too, but she was tired of living as if life were only about survival. She said she wanted the children to have good memories. She wanted them to know what joy was, not just obligation. She wanted them to grow up knowing that working is important, but living is too. Roberto listened, and for the first time in years, He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He didn't try to explain why he was right. He just listened, truly listened. And the more he listened, the clearer it became that he had wasted years of his own life because of a fear he himself had created and fed. On Monday, Roberto did something he had never done before. He took 500 reais from the envelope and went to the hardware store. He bought paint, brushes, rollers, and spackling compound. He went back home, took a week of vacation he had accumulated and never used, and painted the house. The whole house. He didn't hire anyone. He did it himself. And he called his family to help. Lucas and Ana were surprised at first, then excited. They helped choose the colors. They helped paint, even making a mess, even getting dirty, even making mistakes. Claudia prepared a special lunch on Saturday. They ate together, sitting on the floor of the empty living room while the paint dried, laughing at the paint stains on their clothes, their hair, their faces. And when the house was finished, a week later, colorful, clean, smelling new, Roberto stood still in the middle of the living room, looking around, and he felt something he hadn't felt in a very, very long time. He felt proud, not of the money he had saved, not of the envelope hidden away, but of what he had built, of that house that now truly felt like a home, of those walls he had painted with his own hands, with the help of his children, of the memories they had created together during that week. That was only the beginning of a change that would be slow, difficult, full of mistakes, but real. Roberto began to use money differently. He didn't spend irresponsibly. He didn't buy useless things. He didn't blow everything on nonsense. But he stopped being afraid to invest in what made sense. He bought some used books for the children. He found a promotion at an online store and brought home a box with 10 children's books in good condition. Lucas and Ana were fascinated. They had never had their own books before. They had always depended on the few copies from the school library. Roberto invested 300 reais in an online course on basic vehicle mechanics. He had always been interested in it, had always wanted to learn, but had never allowed himself to spend money on something that wasn't absolutely essential. He watched the classes at night, after work, tired but focused. He learned slowly, but he learned. He practiced on their old car, doing basic maintenance that he used to pay a mechanic a lot of money to do. He used 400 reais to pay for a caregiver course for Claudia. She had always wanted to take it, had always wanted to grow professionally, but they never had spare money for that. When Roberto came home, with the enrollment already paid, she cried. She cried from surprise, joy, and relief. She took the course on Saturdays for 2 months. The results were not immediate. It wasn't magic. It didn't change everything overnight. But little by little, slowly, things began to change. Roberto learned to do oil changes, simple alignments, basic repairs. He started offering the service to neighbors and coworkers. He charged little, much less than a repair shop. In the first month, he earned only 50 reais extra. In the second, 120. In the third, 210. It wasn't much, but it was something, and more important than the money. He was building something. He was using a new skill to generate value. He was creating opportunities where before there had only been fear and paralysis. And every cent he earned that way tasted different from his salary. It tasted like achievement, like capability, like growth. Claudia finished the course and got a better job. A private clinic needed a caregiver to assist elderly patients during the day. The salary was 300 reais more than the previous one. But the best part was the schedule. She started at 8 and finished at 5. For the first time in years, she had free evenings. She had time to be with the children. She had time to be with Roberto. Lucas and Ana began to do better in school. Their grades improved. The teacher commented that Lucas was more participative, more focused. Ana began writing small stories in her notebooks, inspired by the books Roberto had bought. It wasn't only because they were eating better, although that helped. It was because they were seeing their parents differently, more present, lighter, more alive, more hopeful. Roberto still saved money, but now it was different. He didn't save out of fear. He didn't save in desperation. He saved with purpose. He had a clear goal: to save enough to buy better tools for his work. Professional tools that would allow him to do more complex services and charge a little more. It took 5 months, but he managed it. He bought a good set of tools. He bought a hydraulic jack. He bought some parts he always needed. And with that, he could start accepting bigger jobs. Brake pad replacements, shock absorber replacements, things he couldn't do before. The extra income began to increase. 500 reais in 1 month, 700 the next. And the most interesting thing, the more he invested, the more he got back. Not magically, not inexplicably, but logically, naturally. Because now he wasn't just working, he was building. He was creating value. He was developing skills that made him more capable, more confident, more prepared to seize opportunities. When Lucas turned 12, he showed interest in computers. He wanted to learn programming. The old Roberto would have said no, that it was too expensive, that it wasn't the right time, that there were more important things. But the new Roberto, the one who was learning to use resources instead of hiding them, thought differently. He researched. He found an affordable beginner's online course. It cost 250 reais for 6 months. He paid for it. Lucas was overjoyed. He studied every day, did exercises, created small, simple programs. And Roberto watched his son grow not only in knowledge, but in confidence. He saw his eyes light up when something worked. He saw him dream of possibilities that Roberto had never dreamed of at the same age. Ana asked to take guitar lessons. Roberto and Claudia talked. They calculated. They found a used guitar for 150 reais. They found a neighbor who gave lessons at a fair price. Ana started. She played badly at first, out of tune, stumbling over the chords. But she played with enthusiasm, with desire, with joy. A year and a half after that conversation with Claudia, that Sunday morning when Roberto had laid everything out and shown the envelope, the family's life was different. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't wealthy. It wasn't free of problems. But it was better. Significantly better. And not because they earned much more, although they did earn a little more, but because they used what they had better. Roberto continued working as a driver. His back still hurt. The job was still exhausting. But he no longer worked himself to death. He didn't take every possible overtime shift. He didn't deprive himself of everything. He set aside time for the mechanical jobs that made a real difference in his income and in his motivation. He set aside time to be with his family. Claudia was happier. She worked in a job that respected her schedule. She earned a little better. She had time to cook calmly, to talk with the children, to be with her husband. Their marriage, which had become nothing more than an administrative partnership of bills and responsibilities, regained intimacy. It regained real conversations, laughter, plans. Lucas was developing. He continued studying programming. He had already done some simple projects. He dreamed of working with it in the future. He had hope. He had goals. He wasn't just surviving childhood, he was building a foundation for the future. Ana played the guitar. She still didn't play well, but she played. And she sang. She filled the house with music, with life, with joy. She was a happy child. Not because she had everything, but because she had enough. And because she saw her parents happy. Roberto still had an envelope. But now, the envelope was smaller. There were about 1,200 reais in it, much less than before. But Roberto didn't feel afraid, because now he understood that real security wasn't in the envelope, It was in the skills he had developed. It was in the tools he had bought that generated income. It was in the education he was giving his children. It was in Lucas's health. It was in Anna's happiness. It was in the renewed partnership with Claudia. Real security was spread throughout his life, not concentrated in a piece of paper hidden in the wardrobe. Roberto learned something fundamental. Money saved without purpose is like stagnant water. It rots. It breeds mosquitoes. It serves no purpose. But money used wisely is like running water. It nourishes, refreshes, gives life, circulates, returns. He learned that true financial security doesn't come from having. It comes from knowing how to use what you have. From investing in yourself. From developing skills. From creating opportunities. From building relationships. From educating your children. From taking care of your health. From strengthening your family. He learned that fear protects no one. Fear paralyzes. Fear blocks. Fear destroys from the inside while pretending to protect from the outside. One Sunday afternoon, Roberto was sitting in the backyard of the house. They had used part of the money to fix up the yard, to repair the gate that used to creak, to plant some simple flowers, to paint the wall, to fix the shower that only heated halfway. The house wasn't luxurious, but it was cared for. It was a true home. Lucas was sitting in one corner, reading a new book he had received. Anna was in another corner strumming the guitar, trying to learn a new song. Claudia was in the kitchen, preparing coffee, softly humming. Roberto looked at that scene and felt something deep, intense, and true. He felt gratitude, not for abundance, because there was no abundance, but for sufficiency, for peace, for the life that was truly happening there, in that moment, in that simple backyard, with the people he loved. That was security, not the envelope. This life he had built over the past months by using the resources he had with intelligence, purpose, and courage. He took his phone and wrote a note to himself. Something he wanted to always remember in moments of fear, in moments of doubt. Money saved without use protects no one. It only postpones life. Real security comes from investing with courage in what matters. It comes from building, not hiding. It comes from using your resources to create value, develop skills, educate children, strengthen relationships, and build opportunities. This story does not have a Hollywood ending. Roberto did not become rich. He did not win the lottery. He did not have a stroke of luck that changed everything overnight. None of that happened. Because this is not a fantasy story. It is a story about real life, about real change, about transformation that is possible for anyone willing to face their fears and do things differently. Today, Roberto is still a bus driver. He still wakes up early. He still works hard. But he no longer destroys himself. He no longer lives as a slave to fear. He no longer denies life to his family in the name of a false sense of security. He works, yes, but he also lives. He also builds. He also invests in what matters. He still has difficult days. He has tight months. He has bills that push the budget to its limit. He has unexpected problems that are scary, but now he faces them differently. He no longer freezes. He no longer panics. He uses the skills he has developed. He uses the resources he has. He uses the support network he has built. And he solves things. The envelope still exists, but it has a different function now. It is no longer a hiding place for fear. It is a conscious reserve for specific emergencies. And Roberto is not afraid to use it when he needs to, because he knows he can rebuild. He knows he can recover. He knows that real security is in him, not in the paper. Lucas is 14 now. He continues studying programming. He has already done a few small freelance jobs. He has already earned his first 100 reais programming. He has perspective. He has dreams. He has direction. Hannah is 9. She plays the guitar reasonably well. She sings at church. She writes small songs. She is a happy, creative, full of life child, everything Roberto was not in his own childhood. Claudia is fulfilled at work. She likes what she does. She is respected, she has purpose, and she has regained a real marriage, not just a survival partnership. And Roberto learned the most important lesson of his life. Security is not having money saved. Security is knowing what to do with the money you have. It is using your resources to build something bigger than yourself, to invest in people, to develop capabilities, to create opportunities, to plant seeds that will sprout and bear fruit. He learned that money is like a seed. If you store it too much, it withers and dies. But if you plant it at the right time, in the right place, with the right care, it grows, it multiplies, it bears fruit, and those fruits generate more seeds, and the cycle continues. Now, think about yourself again. Think about your life, your money, your choices, your fear, and ask yourself this final question. Do you want to be the Roberto from before or the Roberto from after? Do you want to live saving out of fear or building with purpose? Do you want to accumulate dead paper or plant living seeds? The choice is yours. It always has been. It always will be. You can keep doing what you've always done, saving, denying, depriving, hiding, and you will keep having what you've always had. Fear, anxiety, deprivation, emptiness. Or you can do things differently. You can look at the resources you have, no matter how small, and ask, how can I use this to build something better? How can I invest this in something that will return multiplied? How can I use this to grow, to educate, to strengthen, to create? It doesn't have to be all at once. Roberto didn't change overnight. He started small. 500 reais on paint, 300 on a course, 400 on another, step by step, brick by brick, building slowly, but building. And if you are afraid, that's normal. Roberto was too. He was very afraid, but he did it anyway, because he understood something fundamental. Fear does not go away on its own. Fear only goes away when you face it, when you act despite it, when you take one step, then another, until you realize you are moving. Start today, not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, when things get better. Today, look at the money you have. Choose a purpose. It can be small, it can be simple, but choose something that makes sense, something that builds, something that invests in you, in your family, in your real future, and use it. Without guilt, without paralyzing fear. Use it with intention, with purpose, with the awareness that you are planting, not wasting. And observe what happens. Observe how small, well-made investments generate returns. How new skills open doors, how cared-for health gives you energy, how education expands possibilities, how lived moments create memories that sustain you on difficult days. Observe how real security is built, not magically, but concretely, solidly, truthfully. And when you look back, 1 year from now, 2 years, 5 years, you will see what Roberto saw. That the best decision you ever made was to stop saving money out of fear and start investing with purpose. Because it was never about the money. It was never about how much you have. It was always about what you do with what you have. It was always about that. And now you know. Now you can choose. Choose wisely. Your life depends on it.